Welcome to The Open Lid, the podcast from Honens where we dive deep beneath the keys and beyond the stage to uncover the stories, ideas, and artistry that shape the world of piano. I'm your host, Canadian pianist Philip Chiu, and I'm so glad you're here. Together, we're going to explore conversations with artists, thinkers, and creators who remind us what it means to be a complete artist. This podcast is made possible with the generous support of Jeremy Clark and Wolfen Financial. Let's lift the lid and begin. Since 1991, Calgary has been home to one of the world's leading piano competitions. The Honens International Piano Competition was founded on the belief that artistry is about more than just flawless technique, though there will be lots of that. It's about imagination, communication, and an urge to connect with the wider world. This coming October, 10 pianists from around the globe will gather in Calgary for the 2025 edition of this triennial competition. At stake, some of the most generous cash awards in the piano world, and most importantly, a multi-year career development program that will guide a young pianist onto the international stage. Honens has always set itself apart by insisting on the idea of the complete artist. A pianist who is as compelling in their programming and stage presence as they are at the keyboard. To talk about what that has meant, what it means today, and to look ahead to what might be coming, I'm very happy to be joined by three exceptional people at the heart of Honens. First up in the left corner, fueled by a deep passion for music, arts, accessibility, and community impact, President and CEO Amanda Smith. She leads Honens from behind the scenes and in the spotlight. With nearly 8 years of experience at Honens, including roles as its Director of Marketing, Communications, Amanda has expanded the organization's reach and championed initiatives that make music education and performance more inclusive. How you doing today, Amanda?
Great. Thanks for having me, Phil.
So happy to have you here. Thanks for making the time. Next up, the architect of Honens' repertoire and artistic vision, Catherine McClelland, is its Director of Artistic Planning. She shapes the artistic vision of the competition, curates repertoire options, selects jurors, and basically ensures every artistic and educational element reflects Honens' commitment to excellence and to developing the complete artist. How are you doing today, Catherine?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Phil.
Thank you very much for being here. And finally, last but certainly not least, John Kimura Parker, renowned pianist, educator, and broadcaster. John Kimura Parker is Honens' artistic director since 2018, helping guide the competition's creative direction while mentoring the world's brightest young pianists. A gold medalist of the 1984 Leeds competition, officer of the Order of Canada, and so much more. John brings his globe-spanning performance experience from Carnegie Hall to the Sydney Opera House directly to Calgary, offering competitors a living example of what it means to be a complete artist. And I've already asked his permission, though everyone else who knows him seems to know. Hello, Jackie. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much.
Really my pleasure. It's a privilege to have all of you here. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'll ask each of you the same question I've asked each of our 2025 candidates. If you could erase one piano piece from existence, would never have to hear it again, would never have to have people request it of you, what would it be?
Personally, I'm not a fan of Franz Liszt, but I think I've been turned around. I wasn't a big fan of the Liszt Sonata, but I've heard our current laureate play it many times now. And every time I hear something different and something new, and it's a mini drama that I just love now. So I do not want to erase the Liszt Sonata from the repertoire.
Oh, well, there it is. Good plug for Ilya Ovcharenko, our last laureate of Honens, and Amanda.
2 young children who are learning the piano. So, the list is quite long of songs that I really hope to never have to hear again, but we could start with Chopsticks. Chopsticks would be great. Let's just X that.
I love it. And yes,
Minuet in G would be a close
Minuet in
second.
G.
Yeah. There's no way that I'm the first person to say that it would be for Elise. It's got to be for Elise. I finally learned that piece of music in 2020 because it was, big Beethoven anniversary year. And I played it online and then I just never played it again.
You didn't sort of uncover this gem among gems, like you didn't dust it off the layers of.
No, it just doesn't do it for me. But it's the butt of so many piano jokes, like just how kind of trite that it is. So yeah, that would be my number one. Get rid of it forever.
Amanda or Catherine?
Jackie, you're going to be really disappointed because for 2027, I thought we should have a Fur-Elise-a-thon as part of our outreach.
Back to back.
No,
And
to
I'm
back
serious.
to back.
I've mentioned this
What a
before.
terrible idea.
Ask every amateur pianist, just have a community day, but only for these marathon, raise some funds. If we raise 10,000, we stop playing for Elise.
Perfect.
And I'll let you listen to the other podcast episodes to find out what the other pianists thought, but they've all had some really good answers. So the first thing I want to get into is, well, Honens is quite unusual, I would say, among the big international competitions. It wasn't born, for example, in Paris or Moscow and one of these European countries, but in Calgary. And that was, of course, Esther Honens' vision back in 1991. She went out, saw the Van Cliburn, and said, we deserve to have something as good, even better than what's happening down there. So maybe that's the place to begin. How has that original vision evolved into what Honens is today in terms of its relationship to the city?
I had a little bit of an entree into that because, against what might be considered good judgment in a way, I was invited to be on the jury of the first competition, which actually happened in 1992. And I met Esther Honens. And I met her only briefly. She was not only very old, but she was quite ill. And she, I think by sheer will, stayed alive for the first competition. She had a special entry into the hall where she could be private. And she passed away 5 days after that first competition. She was able to see her dream realized. And I think it's a little bit an accident of fate that her life was in Calgary, and she felt very much that, as you said, she wanted to do something like what she had seen in Fort Worth. She wanted to see something like that happen in Calgary. But she also had a very firm belief that Calgary was a cultural city kind of waiting to be nurtured and discovered. And she was very right about that. Esther Honens correctly envisioned that the Honens competition would be really supported by citizens of the city of Calgary, that there would be great interest in having these astounding pianists come to the city and share their music and show their stuff and be the young artists that they are. And the growth of Honens is very much due to how many people in Calgary have risen to the cause and have embraced it, have supported it, have wanted to see it be successful, have wanted to, have traveled around the world in some cases to hear our new laureate perform in different major cities. And that's incredibly exciting to me that support is there.
I would say in terms of how it's grown and been shaped. A number of years ago, previous leadership launched the festival, which has allowed us to stay connected with our community annually instead of triennially. And that's been a great success.
I have a copy of the program book from the first competition in my office, and I like to go through it every once in a while because, first of all, the list of volunteers who helped make it happen is huge. And I still recognize some of those names, 30 some years later. And in the beginning, we brought a lot more competitors to Calgary. So I think it was a really good way to sort of rally the whole community, all the piano dealerships, all the piano teachers. A lot of people were involved from the beginning. And even if they're not as, directly involved, they're still part of the Honens family and they're still audience members. So I think it's really
special.
How
on earth in 1992 did we have that many home hosts? I mean, I don't remember how many competitors there were, but it was dozens and dozens.
30 plus. Yeah.
It was a lot.
And it was in 1992, we didn't have the relationship we have with Steinway now, where Steinway brings and puts pianos in our host houses. So they all have.
Tell us more about that.
In 1992, they had to find homes that had pianos. So there was just walking down the street, listening for piano and knocking on the door, perhaps.
Not creepy at all. Not creepy at all. Yeah, that makes total sense.
It's true. One of our host homes from the beginning hosted Jean-Philippe Babuzet, and he said he was 100% recruited because everybody else on his street had a pianist, and he had a piano, so he was basically strong-armed into participating.
And actually, my question was going to be, how does being in Calgary influence the way these candidates experience the competition? And you've already mentioned some of that, these host families. Having spoken to some competitors and laureates, I mean, they talk about that family, this Honens family. What do you do to cultivate that? How is that sort of built over time? How has that evolved?
I think a lot of it has to do with personal connection and joy. There's an extraordinary sense of community, especially when the competition is happening. And we have all these home hosts who, of course, are completely invested in the competitor that they're hosting. And many of these competitors, not only the laureate, but others occasionally have reason to come and perform again in Calgary. They have permanent friends here, you know, it's very special. Look, we know it's a competition. I competed in my 20s regularly. I know what it's like to be so stressed and wanting to show your best and not wanting to have a bad moment at just the wrong time, and wanting artistry to come through, but also wanting to be technically on top of my game and all the rest of it. I remember that stress so well. And to know that there's a personal support network behind it for these competitors is really, really important. And it means a lot to them. It means a lot to them that they feel valued. And it's very important for us in terms of the value of Honens that every competitor is valued for what they bring to music, regardless of the result of the competition. They are, every one of them, extraordinary musicians.
And I hope that our family, the Honens family, which isn't just our competitors, it's our jury, our artists, our donors, our funders, they all feel valued. Each of those individuals in everything we do, we appreciate and try to demonstrate that daily, talk about that as a team. And we use this language of the Honens family every day in the office. So it's really truly how we live and breathe, and what we believe is that every individual that comes across our path that is brought into our circle becomes an important valued member.
I like this story. In 2022, we had 5 semifinalists were traveling to Calgary on the same flight, and a host home, a brand new host home. They really didn't know that much about Honens, but they were roped into being a host home. Anyway, they found out he's a pilot. And they found out that their competitor was going to be on the plane. And then he found out that 4 more were. So I think on the flight, they made a pretty big deal. And so I can just imagine if you're a semifinalist from Hungary and all of a sudden you hear, and we're so excited to welcome Adam to Calgary. And it was just, that was a very nice story.
Yeah, he arranged so he could be the pilot of that flight.
That's amazing. That is phenomenal. I love that took place.
Actually, they were the host home for Ilya, our current laureate, oddly enough. And, you know, like we've talked about, once you become a host home and you host a competitor, they become part of your family. And hosting the winner is a whole nother.
Is there a hierarchy, like at the dinner parties later?
No.
Do they get like a host family gold medal at the end of that? Just curious.
We actually have a host family that's hosted 6 times and they've never hosted the winner, you know? And so it's just, odds are, no.
Have competitors asked not to stay at that home then?
No. But this host home, interestingly, has said, I don't think we're going to host again because, you know, we got the winner. We're cream of the crop. We're good. And, you know, I think we've done it. We're going to call it quits.
So I want to now circle onto this point of the complete artist. I know it's something that you talk about a lot because it's something that's very special and unique to Honens. And I think it's something that's very important for our listeners who may not be really familiar with Honens to understand, in fact, why it's special and how it's special, and also why it's necessary. Like, competitions are often criticized for creating very cookie cutter kind of pianists, or rewarding them, technically dazzling, and unfortunately, at some level, interchangeable. And so Honens has always tried to push back on that with this idea of the complete artist. So I want to put some things on the table. What is the real point of a competition in 2025? And then why the importance of the complete artist? And who do you want to serve by doing that?
I think a lot about what kind of a musical citizen a pianist is in today's world, you know? Yeah, if you're really successful, and I look at our former laureates, immediately the past 2, Ilya Ovcharenko and Nicholas Namaradze, and see the kind of work that they're doing. And a lot of that work involves playing recitals and playing concertos with orchestra and appearing in chamber music festivals, the standard sorts of things that I've been doing for my career for many decades. And all of that is really important to aspire to and to happen. But I think as the years have gone on, I feel like there are fewer people in an audience that you can assume would maybe understand what sonata form is, for example, or, you know, why would a waltz or a scherzo always be in 3 and not in 4? You know, things like that. Just some basic things that musicians take for granted. Yeah, of course we know that. But to know that an artist is someone who can communicate to an audience and bring them into our world and say, listen to this, listen for that. That's an important skill, I think, for an artist to be willing to be an accompanist to actually be on stage with somebody else where the somebody else is the center of attention and you're providing supportive background. I mean, that's not a huge part of what we're looking for, but it's a small part. To step back for a moment, for anyone listening who's wondering, well, how can you even judge from one pianist to another? I think the easiest analogy is figure skating, because a lot of people have watched figure skating, and Canada's very proud of figure skaters. And you know that there's an incredible technical component. We see the technical component, or in the case of pianists, we hear it, the flashing arpeggios and octaves and all the rest of it. That's your ability to do that is critical. I mean, that's kind of a given, that has to be there. But then what is it that pushes one of those Olympic judges to go from, an 8.9 to a 9.2 and hold up the cards and everything? And you start thinking about, well, was I moved? Did I actually feel transported by that performance? Did I kind of forget where I was for a moment? Was their exploration of a Beethoven sonata or of a Chopin work, did it, without being intentionally just off the wall, was it somehow personal in a way that made me listen to it a little differently? Those kinds of things start to become part of how the members of our jury, who are extraordinarily experienced musicians in different ways and connected to the music world in different ways, how did they respond to that? And that starts to become part of what a complete artist can be. There's a very important component to our judging that I want to mention, because that speaks very much to this idea of trying to find someone who's not, say, an interchangeable or a cookie cutter type of pianist. So I'm going to summarize to the one really important part. All the judges' votes are secret ballot and confidential, and our mathematician sees them and interprets them. But he may come back and say, okay, we have to get from 10 semifinalists to 3 finalists, and you're agreed on who 2 of those finalists are going to be, but you're not agreed on who the last one's going to be. There's a little bit of a discrepancy. And here are the names that we need to discuss. And then this is the critical part. Before that discussion happens, which does lead to another secret ballot, every member of the jury is allowed to advocate for somebody whose name didn't make it. Every member of the jury is allowed to say, I understand why this pianist may not have averaged out well in your rankings, but stop and think about how original her playing was. Stop and think about what she did that nobody else did. And aren't you kind of maybe curious to know how that person would play in the finals? This is a unique opportunity to reward somebody who is special and maybe slightly controversial, but special. That, I think, is a really important part of our search for the complete artist, that little step. It's the step that one of our mathematicians once said. We have Moses Rennert and Ernest Enns who created this system many years ago. And one of them once said, this is a system where Glenn Gould, as divisive as his interpretations were, could theoretically win a competition with this system. We're not looking for something that's intentionally bizarre. We're just looking for a true artist. And that true artist, there's a lot of different components to that. And we want to give the jury all the possible data for them to be able to really get to know these young artists, not just by hearing them play, but also, hearing them speak, seeing how they program, how do they collaborate with others, all those things, they all matter.
I would say also, if you were a presenter, being practical, if you had a chance to hire someone who was a really excellent pianist, but they made no impression with your audience, and another one, they loved him and they wanted to, subscribe to your series, which one would you pick? If you were a university looking for a professor who was a really good pianist and even a very, very good teacher, but he made no impression on your donors, for example, which one would you pick? I think it's important that you can be able to communicate as well as perform.
I remember a time not that long ago where presenters would say, please don't talk. Our audiences don't like talking. Please don't talk. Please don't talk. And now in the last 3-4 years, they're all begging for artists who can connect with an audience that way. They're begging now.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I finally went to the Calgary Stampede in July. I've never been, which is terrible. I'm just never typically in Calgary in the summer. There were chuck wagon races and things. And thankfully, I happened to be sitting with a couple of very good friends who told me what was going on. I would have really felt a little lost if I had no idea. I mean, it was so much more enjoyable that I understood what was happening.
And that there were people there wanting to explain it to you, willing to invite you in.
And I feel exactly the same way about playing a concert. I don't ever want somebody to not come to a piano recital because they're worried that they won't understand what's happening. I want people to come and be curious and open to this experience. And for example, at the competition, goodness, there's going to be so much great music making and so much true artistry and incredible amount of technical flash too, right? That's really exciting to witness. I want people to come for that.
We want this concept of the complete artist to flow through everything we do at Honens. And that doesn't just mean nurturing and accelerating the careers of these laureates, these exceptional pianists, but how are we teaching piano teachers to raise up complete artists? How are we engaging with the young pianists in our communities across Canada and helping them think about becoming a complete artist? Are those teachers teaching them to speak at the age of 5? Those are really important skills. And even if they don't become a pianist, a professional pianist, those skills are going to transfer into their lives and their success as a citizen here and across the world. We look at everything we do with that lens on. How was the work that we're doing in our community raising up the next generation of complete artists? So we've got a program called Keys for Newcomers. As you know, in Canada, we have seen so many newcomers come in, and Alberta in particular, due to wars and varying situations, we have seen a lot of Ukrainian come to Alberta. And there was a need for these young children who had music and piano as such an important part of their daily lives that they were just ripped from that. And it would be one way to help them find home. And so we have paired students with newcomer teachers so they can do piano lessons in their own language and feel at home again. So everything we do is asking, how do we help them grow? How do we help them understand what they're learning? We have a lens of the complete artist, and we want to encourage and raise up that next generation.
There's so many resources that go into running something of this size and of this stature, from the prize money to the career programs to the community projects. How do you make choices about where to invest that when you can't do everything and all the things you want to do?
We can't do everything?
We just spent an hour on our goals.
Do you put it all in the hat and you just each get to pick one?
We just draw.
Yay, keys to newcomers. Yay,
Yeah.
Lobster dinner for everyone.
Oh, the team would love that. It's a great question. We've just gone through some pretty intensive strategic planning with our board and our team and selected 3 strategic priorities that will guide all of our decisions and our choices. One of those is leaning into our Canadian identity as Canada's piano competition and building deeper relationships with presenters across Canada, touring our laureates across Canada, bringing some of our community programming across Canada. So we keep those in mind, and we have to ask the hard questions. Does this fit into our strategic priorities? I know anybody listening to this podcast doesn't care about our strategic priorities. I'm sure there's an audience out there that actually would be so interested to hear there is an eye towards a public good, that there is like, I mean, the background that you come from, the not-for-profit, this whole idea that it's more than just a flashy show. My passion is sustainability in all nonprofits. And Honens is my heart, has been my heart for so many years. I believe firmly in the value of competition. We have lost a little bit of that in Canada, and I want to encourage and demonstrate in what we do here that it's more than just a hoity-toity thing that's not meaningful. Competition spurs people on to be better. It asks them to look at things differently. We also ask our artists daily, what are you doing to share the joy of the piano with the communities that you are working in, playing in, performing in? How are you inspiring the next generation of listeners? I go back to this complete artist, this idea that there are so many skills that add to how we give back to our community, how we are global citizens. It's not just about a competition. It's about raising up people who make impact.
A couple of years ago, I was giving school concerts, and Ilya Ovcharenko, our most recent laureate from 2022, joined me, and I had him perform, but I also kind of showed him, this is how you can make a Beethoven sonata actually fun for kids. Let's do that. And we broke it apart in a certain way that they could relate to it. And that's fantastic public service to do that, to bring that music to kids.
During those school concerts, Jackie also sang Peaches to all the children. He failed to mention.
If anyone's wondering what that sounds like, go ahead and Google it. I'm not going to play that here.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's not on Google, but or on YouTube anywhere, like a bootleg that a 3-year-old made. It's probably all over the place.
Kids these days, man. It went on Snapchat right then.
Well, and that was specifically Amanda's kids. I said, hey, what do you got? What's your favorite music right now? And yeah, Peaches came up right away. And I thought, okay, I am going to sit down and watch a Mario Brothers movie. This is going to be somehow worth it. And then here, one of the main characters in the movie is a bulldog or something, like wearing like a purple black tuxedo, seated at a grand piano. I mean, what could be more perfect, right? So why not? That became my weirdly complete artist moment that week.
What's one skill that you think classical pianists consistently underestimate or ignore?
I would say public speaking, which we've touched on already, but the ability to understand what it is that you're playing, and then to be able to communicate that to whatever audience it is that you're playing for that day, whether it's in fact grade 3 kids, or whether it's for an audience that you know for a fact are not actually music fans, or an audience that are diehard music lovers who have been going to recitals for a long time.
What about the ability to sleep in economy class when you're traveling?
Bravo.
Very, very good.
Bravo.
Very good.
I think of Ilya, who'll arrive in the morning and just keep on going all day. And he said, well, I sleep in a plane. I mean, I can't sleep in a plane, especially in the middle seat in economy. I would not be able to. I would not be able to sit there even. But I think it's important.
Yeah, that's the life of an international touring artist, right? And having to show up on time and ready. Amanda?
I'd say the importance of understanding marketing and how to market oneself or advocate for oneself. I think maybe marketing is catching on a little bit, especially with social media and that generation, but advocating to be able to communicate what you need, what your value is, why you need it. I think that's something that we can help train these artists in.
An artist becomes a citizen when, and what would you say?
I think an artist becomes a citizen when they have an idea of how their music making can be a part of their life and everyone around them. You need to know what your purpose is, where you fit, what's realistic, how you can grow, how that can affect everyone and everything around you.
I think an artist becomes a citizen when they realize that what happens outside of the practice room is equal value to your performance and to your, purpose as the work you do in the practice room.
Know what they want to say and figure out how to say it, as opposed to just performing.
Right. Yeah. Big difference. It sounds so small. And it's a huge gap, right? What do you hope that an audience member at the Honens competition take away from their experience?
I would want them to say, I had no idea how transformative music can be. Like, what have I been missing? My goodness, this is incredible. I've met people at the previous 2 Honens competitions that I've been a part of, and I've met people in many other concert series that I've been a part of who've had that reaction. It's like, I had no idea. This is, this is riveting. It's incredible. And that's my favorite thing.
Yeah, this is going on. This is going on in my city. Like, what? Why are we talking about this?
I want them to feel like they're part of the Honens family. I want them to go home and make some bookmarks. I want them to, bookmark our laureates so they can follow them for the next 3 years until the next competition and beyond, of course. But yeah, I just want them to have that feeling that I'm part of this. It's not just about the people on the stage. It's all of us.
Amanda?
How do I follow up on either of those answers?
You got to speak up first next time,
I'm being too Canadian and gracious. I want every person who walks into our circle to feel seen, valued, heard, and a part of the family. We want people to experience the joy that music brings. We experience joy every day in the work that we're doing, and we want our audiences to feel that as well.
Thank you 3 so much for taking this time with me today. That was Amanda Smith, President and CEO of Honens, Catherine McClelland, Artistic Planning Director, and John Kimura Parker, Artistic Director. You can find out way more about them and about Honens at honens.com. You're listening to the Open Lid podcast by Honens. Thanks for being here. On each episode, it is my privilege to introduce to you 2 of the 10 remarkable pianists who will be storming the stage this October in Calgary. The Honens International Piano Competition is one of the world's most exciting showcases of musical talent. And these aren't just great pianists. They are here to speak for themselves.
And I see how music in some contexts is powerless and in some contexts is powerful. And I think it's important actually to recognize that distinction.
Thoughtful words from Derek Wang, a semifinalist of the upcoming Honens competition. He recalls being drawn to the keyboard from an early age, where the piano was the largest piece of furniture in his childhood home in the suburbs of Boston. Fast forward a few years, and Derek is the Creative Enterprise Fellow at the Juilliard School, where he curates and produces interdisciplinary shows. He has degrees from Juilliard, Yale, with further studies in progress at the Musikhochschule in Hanover, Germany. And he's my first guest for today. How you doing, Derek?
Great, Phil. Great to be here and looking forward to our chat.
I have to say, Derek, I'm already pretty nervous. When I read your bio and I look at your resume, I feel like you should have been hosting these episodes.
Gosh, you know, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was don't believe your own PR. So in any case, I'm excited to put aside the resumes, put aside the credentials, and just talk about music and life. Yeah.
It's amazing the work you've done. It sounds like you were co-hosting a part of you were on part of the NPR's Tiny Desk, that you've also hosted. What is this podcast series called? American Stories. How did you get into all of this? This is just amazing stuff.
Yeah, I think it just comes from the urge to communicate, the urge to set music and my performances in a context that I challenge myself to enlarge that context. I'll put it that way. I challenge myself to try to place my music making in contexts that are sometimes kind of stretching my own self, you know. So that podcast, for example, I mean, that kind of was a project that started in the pandemic when we were really trying to, through a digital medium, mend a bit of that disconnect that those of us who were sitting at home finding all this time to practice felt between those who were, say, working in the hospitals, working, you know, still driving their trucks, to take 2 examples of 2 different people we interviewed. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that, you know, I think that's just something that I've increasingly felt is part of my calling, my responsibility, not only making the music, but also thinking about how it's presented to people, thinking about all aspects of the show that it's a part of, be that a live show or something taking place on digital media like this.
Where, for you, like, where does this idea of you feel it's your duty to be a communicator, not only through your hard practice?
In some ways, on a personal note, it almost comes from the way that I discovered music, or we could say this tradition of piano repertoire, mm-hmm. because I remember quite clearly as a kid kind of feeling on the outside of that myself. I mean, my family, who've been the most supportive of my piano playing career and just interest from the time I was a kid, but we didn't have that background. We didn't grow up going to concerts, and while we might have turned the radio to the classical music station, while we might have owned 1 or 2 CDs of you know, whatever the greatest hits would be, you know, how they would be packaged. For me, you know, I remember a time when reading the program notes at a concert all went over my head, and I was concerned that there was something I should have been getting listening to the music that I wasn't. And I also felt in my own kind of life growing up this interesting kind of disconnect between, as I got more and more engaged in music, most of my friends at school, you know, that was not something that carried over to their understanding. And so I was always thinking about how is it that I can build that bridge. How is it that I can synthesize different worlds within my own life? I think I naturally enjoy speaking about music as part of my own kind of creative process, I would say, verbally. You know, I'm jotting down little bits of prose in the margins of my score and all of that. And I think it's just a natural extension that I'd like people to get a little bit into my head to the extent that it might help them hear the music.
Talk to us a little bit about these interdisciplinary projects. I'd love to know, what is this Juilliard station?
So there is a new street-facing space that we've opened. It's behind the glass. It was literally a kind of a storefront space that we've taken over. And the shows are all free, and people walking by on the street see when something's going on, and they pause and they're free to come in. And so I think it's this bold idea that we owe to the president of Juilliard, to Damien Wetzel, that the conservatory has something to learn from the street or from being close to the street. Mm-hmm. And that it's a space that serves many functions in that regard. It's the most public-facing face of the school on street level. It's also a lab for the students to try out ideas and that have an audience ready-made in an intimate setting where they can experiment. And I'm just there to try to instigate things through shows that I curate and program, and through kind of just thinking through how to incorporate this kind of thinking more into the school's profile.
What's at the heart of it for you? Why the different things? Why the multimedia? Why the dance? Why the spoken word?
It's an interesting question, which is on the surface level semantics, and then you realize whatever you call it, concert, recital, show, a Festspiel if you're Wagner, whatever you call it, there's layers of association, and as a kind of Liszt player, I often think about when Liszt borrowed the word recital from a different context, from the context of a poetry recital, meaning that he's taking with it these not implications that we currently have with the word, which is perhaps something a little more restrained, that we don't expect the pianist is going to invite a actor on stage during a recital. But in Liszt's time, I think to use that word meant that here was something that was going to embrace the poetic, going to embrace the fanciful or fantastical in the very high sense of the Romantic era, that those attributes were very ennobling and beautiful. And so I think I do think consciously about drawing people in. And this is something that everyone in our world is thinking about. We're in the attention economy, right? We recognize that when someone pays you their attention, they are paying you with a very valuable form of currency. And when you're a holder of that currency as a performer, when people have given you their attention, it's a responsibility. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also a responsibility. And I also think that the nature of this attention, when we're talking about a concert or show, is different. It's on a higher plane. I mean, I remember last year I went to a play, and it was in a very intimate setting, and I had, just by chance, an amazing seat. All the seats were the same price, but for some reason the one that was remaining was right in the middle, and I could see the faces of the actors so closely. It was as though I was sitting and having coffee with them, except they were in such states of transport and intensified emotion. And I thought, you can't put a price tag on this. You can put a price tag on an experience which is so kind of distant from you that it feels like a service that you just paid for and it happened. But when it's something that's about human encounter, you can't talk about it in normal kind of economic or everyday terms. It truly becomes something either spiritual or simply more human, right? And I think to try to get my music making onto that plane where people are paying attention to the music, not just at the level of I hear what's happening, but a sympathetic kind of vibrating with the music, a sympathetic identification with the progress of the musical narrative.
This collaboration I think you just had with Emmy Mahmood at Aspen?
That was one of those totally spontaneous things that happened. We had both independently prepared without knowing it, to be ready for this absolutely spontaneous collaboration, which happened, an hour before we were supposed to go on at the Aspen Ideas Festival, the opening session. But I've been doing more work with the spoken word, both with myself speaking while playing and with others. And so when I heard Emmy reading this incredible poem that synthesized her own childhood in Sudan with a kind of call to greater action, greater compassion, it was really something that was perfect as a summons, to open this event. And she saw that I was also there, that there was a piano on stage. I was going to play some Bach earlier in the show. And the idea was, hey, how can we actually synthesize, what we do. And so I took a Philip Glass piece that I had been playing to a different text, Wichita Vortex Sutra. I'd been doing that to the Allen Ginsberg text that he wrote it for. I think it was very much keeping in the spirit of Philip Glass and of the creativity with Allen Ginsberg that gave birth to that piece, that, hey, here is another text, another speaker, another message, which is right for right now.
What do you say to the view music has no place in politics or social issues? I'm teeing you up again, Derek, but I am curious to hear you speak a little bit about it.
As a musician, I advocate. I want to be an advocate on the part of music. As a person, I'm also to some extent going through the same things that we as people go through, and I see how music, in some contexts, is powerless, and in some contexts is powerful. And I think it's important actually to recognize that distinction. I think that as we are all trying to create a better world, there's very concrete ways, mostly involving money, that can happen to improve a person's life. I don't think music always can rearrange where the money is in a way that aligns with justice or with, that's not necessarily the powerful thing about music. There's other fields, there's other expertises which we need to ensure that. But what music does do powerfully is remind us why it's worth fighting for something good, and why it's important. And it reminds us that the mind needs to be synthesized with the heart, but also the body.
There's an interview with Nicholas Namaradze, and former Honens laureate, where he singles out a particular quality from each of his teachers. He talks about Zoltan Kocis and the idea of musical honesty. He singles that out as the quality he took from him. And then Emmanuel Ax and the idea of proportion, the beautiful dosing of a dynamic or a phrase shape here. And he talked about his time with John Carigliano and the idea of, macro structure before diving deep into details. So would you be willing and interested in sort of identifying whether it's Stephen Hough or Kaplinsky, Ricalio, kind of a particular idea that you strongly identify with their teaching or that you took away from their time?
That's such a great thing, actually. Wow. Let me see how efficient I can be, because especially in this context, I do feel like I should start with my very first piano teacher. Yeah, Mrs. Dorothy Shi, the late Dorothy Shi, who taught basically many of the Chinese immigrant families in my area, in the Boston area. And from her lessons, I really do remember patience. I think the importance of that patience, and I still feel that her presence, the patience with which she dealt with me as a kid, coming to the immense amount of of things you have to worry about playing the piano. Put it that way.
I've always said I'm so lucky in life to have had like such patient, kind teachers. Not easygoing, not laissez-faire, but patient and kind.
If I have patience as my very start with Dorothy Shi, and then with Matti Recalio, who I studied with for 4 years, middle school and high school. And I think curiosity. I mean, I first came to him, he was talking about all these things, from fingering to historic recordings to analyses of pieces to their cultural context, unusual repertoire. And this was all an exotic world for me at the time. But till now, the energy with which he opened all those doors is an energy that I've tried to, I realize that if I've done anything that worked out, it was with that. It was because I was able to have that energy toward it. And then Veda Kaplinsky, who was my dear teacher for 8 years, I think the longest time of any teacher I've had. except for my very first teacher. I think she insisted on such high standards. All of her students know this. I remember once that a friend of mine who was recovering from an injury and really having to rebuild the technical aspect of approaching the piano. And this friend told me that Veda had said, everything you play should give you deep physical pleasure to do. It's interesting that that orientation, and I don't know how to put it in a word, it's like it's activation. It's that everything you're doing has to be so vividly felt physically. It's not enough to just know that, oh, I'm trying to shape the phrase into a long line. Like anyone can say that. Any teacher in some sense can tell you that. But the teacher who can make you feel it in a way that your body won't forget, in a way that even if you don't practice that piece for a year and come back to it and you'll still have that body memory of how it should flow. I think that's something. And with Stephen Huff, I think it was more just I marvel at his playing. Actually, whenever I can, I try to listen to his recordings almost on a daily basis. And the fact that I can feel that I can feel his own personal presence when I'm hearing such playing is a blessing. I'm very lucky. I think Stephen Huff showed me the warmth that music making needs to be done with. I heard this saying that in baseball you can't play with gritted teeth. You can't hit the ball well with gritted teeth. It works when it proceeds from a relaxation of a flow of this inner warmth, right? And I have two more teachers. I'll try to wrap this up. But I think Boris Slitsky was the 2 years I worked with him, just naturalness was so important, and it's connected. It's of course connected to activation. What I said with Veda and the warmth of Stephen Huff. Yeah, he was always willing to kind of poke me where I needed to be kind of poked, in the sense of, he would say, I can hear you thinking through this phrase. I can hear that you've debated in the practice room whether it should do this or this. And, perhaps I'm even impressed that you've considered all the options, but that's not at all good enough. You need to commit to one, and you need to be you need to get out of your own way, is something I think I was trying to do. Yeah. And now I think with Ari Vardi, it's been a lovely relationship in the year that I've studied with him, truly lovely. And I think his perspective in a way, just for me, represents culture in its most beautiful sense. Just the ability to appreciate. He listens to me in my lessons, and he listens to all his students with such sincerity. So in a sense, I feel like like he's a master gardener of his students who come in various different stages, of course.
All right, Derek, if you could meet one composer, living or dead, who would it be and why? What kind of time would you want to spend with them?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Am I going to time travel into their time, or are they going to time travel into my time?
You get to decide.
All right, yeah, because I really would love if I could bring Ives into our time now, and I think
I can't imagine the music he would write now if he had to. Yeah, my goodness. Is there a composer whose music you admire and enjoy, but don't enjoy playing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I maybe I won't answer that question if that's okay. I mean, I feel like there's composers that I just happen not to play very much of, like for example, Scriabin. Although I actually hope to change that. I see no reason why I wouldn't enjoy playing Scriabin. I think it's just one has to compartmentalize a little bit when you're a pianist, right?
If you could erase a single piece of classical music from existence, so it would never be heard and it would never be asked of again, and no one would ever talk about it, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to answer this. For me, hey, I'm open to mending my relationship, but with the piece. But right now, my answer to that would unfortunately be pictures at an exhibition.
Could you give a little why? Like, what do you feel about it? Are you just tired of everyone playing it? Like, what's your...
Oh gosh, I hate to come across so curmudgeonly. To me, the grandeur of it seems a little bit at odds with the, like the little pictures, like the little chicks and then the little,
Yes.
and then the little market scene and all of that. And I don't quite understand how it's meant to all be put together in a whole.
Derek, my last question for you before I close our time for today, which I've appreciated so much. What do you hope audiences take away from one of your performances? What do you want to leave with people?
I would hope that it would make them happy to be alive in the moment. I don't want it to be about, I don't want my performance to be about how great I am, but where it's actually about the culture of piano playing, which is ours. And I hope that people would feel that way, regardless of the background with which they come to it. I hope that they would feel that I'm participating in a culture which is theirs, which is ours. And I would hope that it makes them feel happy to be alive in this moment.
Derek, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you and chatting with you.
Sounds great, Phil. Thanks so much. You've been so generous and just great to be with. Yeah.
Till next time.
All right. Take care.
Bye for now. That was pianist Derek Wang, semifinalist of the upcoming Honens competition. You can catch both of his semifinal rounds on October 16th and 18th, where he'll be performing works by Iman Habibi, Sergei Rachmaninoff, Charles Ives, Ludwig van Beethoven, and Franz Liszt.
I think that sometimes I hear playing where I feel that everything was beautifully played in a way or skillfully played, but I felt that there was just no personality in the music and I didn't learn anything about the person.
That was pianist Carter Johnson speaking about the importance of having a unique musical personality. Carter currently lives in Connecticut with his wife Hannah and their sons Preston and Ambrose. In the past few years, he's participated in quite a number of international competitions and has a thriving concert career. He is our next semifinalist and my next guest. Please welcome Carter. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you today?
Doing great, thank you. And yourself?
Doing all right. And I understand you're in Perry Sound right now?
Yeah, that's correct.
And do I understand correctly, you just played Moonlight Sonata last night?
Yes, that's also correct.
I'm spying, right?
Nice.
How did it go?
It was great. It was my first performance of the piece, and it was really fun. And finally, I think it's the right time for me to play this piece. I kind of grew up being sick of this piece, and finally, I think when you get to a certain age, you realize, no, this is great music.
So what did it feel like to play it finally? Is it everything you thought it might have been, more than?
The audience was great. And there was candlelight on stage, which I think for the Moonlight Sonata is a really nice atmosphere.
Yeah.
And the third movement is deceptively hard. I mean, I think it's really not that hard, but it's a little bit harder than you think. But all things considered, it went pretty well, and it's something I hope to be able to do again.
And how is your summer going? Where have we caught you in the midst of all your summer activities?
These concerts at Perry Sound are my last concerts, and later in August, I'm actually going to South Carolina for my brother's wedding. And then we're going to have a brief little vacation down there before I come back up for the beginning of the school year.
And that leads really perfectly to one of my first questions that I think listeners would be so interested to know, Carter. In interviews written about you, you speak a fair bit about your family. Even on your Instagram, one of your headlines is "Family Man" with a heart, with the beautiful heart emoji next to it.
That's true.
Would you be comfortable speaking a little bit to what is this like? This balancing of you're a young man yourself. You are traveling around the world. You are playing everywhere. You were just at the Van Cliburn. My goodness, congratulations, by the way. What is that like balancing? You have is it two sons that you have?
That's right.
And so what's that like?
I think people think that my life must be really, really hard. to have to do all this at the same time. But I think in many ways, my family makes my life easier. One of the most important things is that they provide balance and grounding and and uh, support in a way that audiences cannot, because they're at home with me. They're hearing me prepare this music. They know my feelings about the music I'm playing. My kids have their favorite pieces which I play, and I draw inspiration from that a lot. Sometimes certain pieces I think of myself as playing them for them. For example, in the Van Cliburn competition, in the Prokofiev concerto, they have a favorite moment in the fourth movement, which I always kind of think of them in that moment. It's actually the lullaby, the D minor, the slow part in the center of the fourth movement. That was because I was able to play that for them and they were actually in the hall. That was kind of the moment that I felt that performance, I was able to kind of pull it together.
You draw on their support and their love for it. You know, at the least you play for them, and you know already how much they love it and how much it means to them.
That's exactly right. Very beautifully put.
One question that I'm asking all of the competitors, all of the candidates, and you could take your moment to think about it a little bit, Wayne. Do you have some thoughts as to key teachers? Not to say that they haven't all, of course, taught you so much, but are there, I think I'm looking back at, of course, well, your teacher now, Wei Yen, Mark Anderson, even one of your first teachers, I believe, Shelley Roberts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think it's important that you be able to look back on all of the teachers that you've had and identify at least a couple of things that you were able to glean from them, essential things that you can carry with you to all of your repertoire. Well, Shelley Roberts, she taught me for about 12 years, from when I was 5 to 17. She's very expressive. She's always singing, waving her arms, kind of dancing. If anything in the music is fun or groovy, she doesn't just sit there. Her body, is always kind of moving. So I will always be grateful to her for that legacy and just for helping me love and find the fun in music. And then another teacher I studied with is Michelle Mayers. And one of the most important things I learned from her was actually how to play Bach. She plays Bach so beautifully, and I will never forget a lesson where I brought to her the A minor Bach English suite, and this was the first suite that I'd ever played. I didn't really know about what made the dances different, and so just spending a whole lesson of having her also conducting and singing, and just showing me the fine, delicate beauties of each of these dances. Is that something that I carried through to all of my Bach playing even today? It was very, very influential for me. And then with Mark Anderson at UBC, I studied with him for 4 years. He did a lot of demonstrating for me. Not all teachers do this, but he did a lot. And I liked that, especially as a young undergrad. It was very formative for me in terms of developing a full sound. He's one of those teachers that whatever you play, he'll play a couple measures of it at the other piano. And even if the other piano is a worse piano, it always better than you.
what a humbling experience every single time, eh?
And particularly with Mark, we worked on some of the masterworks in excruciating detail, which as a young undergrad I think was really important. I think we spent a whole semester just working on the Schumann Fantasy, maybe a couple of pages per lesson sometimes, and I feel like through that kind of detailed work, of course, you don't just get to know that piece, but you really get to know something about Schumann, who was a composer I hadn't played much of it.
And I hear now also that you would, if I may quote you, if Schumann were alive today, you would be besties. Is that right?
He would. He is my favorite composer. We would be besties. I'm quite sure of that.
And then just a few more teachers. Your New York time and now Yale.
I had Well, at Juilliard, I had Professor Kallenstein, who's not with us anymore, and only studied for a year, and the lessons were online. We never even got to meet. I was in New York, he was in New Jersey. We met in person. He had the most uncanny ability to hear through the worst recording quality and the worst instrument, not blame any of, or he would not criticize me for anything that was not my fault. Like he was here through all of that somehow. And if the sometimes he would say, the sound here is not good, but I think it's the piano. And then he would say, okay, the sound here is not good, and I know it's you.
The kind of perceptiveness, again, that is terrifying and humbling, but also very reassuring, right? I mean, there's nothing like a teacher who you feel can see you honestly.
Exactly. And some of my most cherished lessons with him were on the Bach Capriccio, on the departure of a beloved brother.
What a wonderful piece, eh?
And I opened with that piece at the Van Cliburn, and that nobody else probably knew this, but for me that was kind of the tip of the hat in his memory.
That's so beautiful.
And then with Professor Ray Callio, he bequeathed to me a rich philosophy of selecting the best fingerings. Genius. I would say, I'm having trouble finding a good fingering here, and you should see the way that his eyes would light up with joy. Problem to work out. And then he would sit down with it and look at it for maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then you could see his brain was like a computer. It was just cycling through all of the possible options. And then he would say, okay, so in this passage, I would do this, but here are two others that might be better for you depending on your hand. And without a doubt, anything that he gave me was usually better than what I had been doing.
The one day he'll ask you for a fingering, then you'll know you've made it.
I don't know if that.
And then finally, your current professor, your latest professor, Wei Yiyan.
Professor Yang, yeah, and he also is the other teacher that I've been with for the longest, and it was a bit of a steep learning curve beginning to study with him because he is so demanding about every single little line. It doesn't matter if it's just two notes connected by a slur in the bass. If you don't care for it, it hurts him in a way, especially if it's music that he loves. We've become very close working on all of this music, not just as two musicians, but kind of as two souls. I feel like these days we're talking about films and poetry as much as we are talking about the music that we're playing, and that's, to me, the perfect student-teacher relationship.
Carter, I think you've done beautiful justice to all of your teachers. Would you like to speak a little bit about these last few years of competitions? Has it been grueling? Has it been enlightening?
Both of those descriptors are quite correct. It's grueling, it's difficult, and people see the things that you've won, but behind that, there's a whole closet full of disappointment, as you know, and yet I try, and I have tried my best in those competitions where I was cut after the first round or whatever, to at least always have learned something from it, or learned as many things as I can to bring to the next one. So I think that attitude of learning from each of those experiences is important, rather than just leaving it at, the jury gave me weird feedback. They didn't know what they were talking about. This is all stupid. There's a temptation towards that.
Of course, self-protection.
I think if you can allow yourself to venture out from that a little bit and just try and learn as much as possible, it will put you on a fast track to finding more success.
Is there anything that you felt you learned about yourself, or you are learning about yourself through the crucible of all these competitions?
Yes, I would say that I have learned in the end not to program anything just because I feel that the competition would like it or because a particular jury would like it, if it is not something that I would normally want to play on my own.
How do you feel about your programs for the two semifinals of the upcoming Honens competition? Do they feel personal to you? Do you love and adore and would hug every single piece?
And that's absolutely true. I thought about them for a really long time. And I know particularly for the Honens, the programs are important, not just in terms of what they offer from individual pieces, but the effect of the whole and the ingenuity of the design of them. I know that's something that this competition is particularly aware of.
Would you tell me a little bit about this Kulenti piece, Atlantis solo?
Yes, Hanna Kulenti is she's a Polish composer, and actually this was the commissioned work for one of the Paderewski competitions. Basically, it began as a jazz improvisation, and then it took form as a notated composition in two versions, one for piano solo and one for piano and flute. So that's why it's called Atlantis Solo, because it's the version.
Got it.
I don't have a lot of experience playing jazz. I'm no good as a jazz improviser, but to be able to participate in anything which is adjacent to jazz, and I'm not talking about, the way that Ravel uses jazz, which is also wonderful, but something which actually started as a jazz improv, then blossomed into a concert piece with everything that I like in minimalism, yet it's also pretty virtuosic, and I think it's going to be a wonderful performance.
There's one more quote from you that I want to share, and I'll just preface it by saying, there's this belief sometimes, both from within the music community and so therefore also from those on the outside or who are less familiar with it, that in order to be a successful musician, in order to have an international career, you better have started young and you better have already been recognized, studied at Curtis, already been around the world 3 times before you get your driver's license. And there's this beautiful quote from you about having grown up in Campbell River, which is just on the east coast of Vancouver Island. I never felt that growing up in Campbell River was anything less than a huge advantage in my musical education. Could you speak a little bit to that?
One of the advantages of growing up somewhere like Vancouver is that there is a bigger musical community. If you want, there are more festivals you could enter. There are more performances you could go to. It has all of that going for it. And at the same time, I think also people are naturally pulled into a much more competitive way of looking at music making, even as a young kid. And I think it can be more difficult for people's self-esteem if you're in that really big pond, which for some people that might be a good thing. For some people that might not be a good thing. I would say growing up in Campbell River, it was a smaller town. We didn't have so many concerts, although we did have some good concerts. We don't have as many teachers, although, again, the quality of the teachers for a small town is very high. But I got to know that community as a whole community because it's smaller, and I got to give concerts over the years for that complete audience. I got to know them very well, and gave me a sense of such wonderful support that the whole community was behind me. I knew most of the major teachers in the city, and the musical life was as alive and healthy as anything you could hope for growing up on Vancouver Island. For me, it was exactly the right place for me to be.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Carter. Some questions for you, and these are a little bit offbeat-ish.
Okay.
If there was a composer you could meet, living or dead, who would it be? Am I safe to say Schumann?
Yeah, it would be. That's correct.
Easy one. And if you could commission a work from any composer, living or dead?
Am I allowed to provide any specifics about the work, or do I in general?
Specifics, absolutely.
I would like to commission a piano concerto by Franz Schubert.
Oh, Carter, what a good answer.
The one thing that I really, really, really want, and we don't have it.
Do you have a musical opinion that would probably start an argument, like a hot take?
I'm a people pleaser, so I have many hot takes, and I'm reluctant to share them. I'll give you one. The late music of Schumann and the late music of Fauré is only for people who truly get it. That's such an elitist thing to say? I listen to this music and I think this is some of the most sublime art ever created in the world. And I would say 90% of the people I talked to seemingly just were like, Schumann went crazy at the end, it's no good. Or this late Fauré stuff, it's really kind of unlistenable, isn't it? And I just think, they're just not part of our special club.
What do you hope audiences take away from one of your performances? You specifically, Carter Johnson.
Would hope that they would learn something about me as a person through my playing, and that they would learn something about what Carter is like, anything they want. But beyond that, not too much more about me, but that they would hopefully fall in love with the music that I'm playing, especially if it's something that they haven't heard, or maybe it's something that they have heard. And if I'm able to help them hear it or appreciate it in some new dimension, from some new angle, or, uncovering some new truth, that's all I really ask for.
Why is it important to you that they know something about you from your playing?
Because I think that sometimes I hear playing where I feel that everything was beautifully played in a way, or skillfully played, but I felt that there was just no personality in the music and I didn't learn anything about the person. And when that happens, I usually feel that there's just a sort of general deadness to the music, and the work itself does not communicate.
Thank you for taking the time today to speak with me.
No problem. It's my pleasure. We'll see you in October.
Right on.
Have a good one.
Bye for now.
Okay, bye.
That was pianist Carter Johnson, semifinalist of our upcoming Honens competition. You can catch his 2 semifinal rounds on October 16th and 18th, where he'll be performing works by Robert Schumann, Alexander Scriabin, Hanna Kulenti, Maurice Ravel, and Sergei Prokofiev. And that's it for today's episode of Open Lid. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery into music and artistry. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to follow, subscribe, and most of all, share this podcast with your friends and family. You can also explore upcoming events, competition updates, and a whole lot more at honens.com. That's HONENS.com. Open Lid is hosted by me, pianist Philip Chiu, with special thanks to Jeremy Clark and Wolfen Financial for their support. Also, special thanks to Simon McLeod. Incidentally, I'll be co-hosting the 2025 Honens International Piano Competition live stream along with Carmen Morin, so be sure to tune in for that. Until then, keep listening, keep discovering, and be sure to keep that lid wide open.